Kia ora tātou. Just while I was getting set up, hei te tuatahi me karaki ai tātou, hei whakatūwhera hoki I tēnei hui I tēnei rā. O tira I runga I tērā, kua mutuakinga whakamārama I tēnei wā. Ka whakamoimiti ka oha o hātu ana mātou kia koe mō mātou rā e ko pia nei te waho te raiona. Nā māu e tono mai tau wāna hera ka hei te rangi hei whakatūwhera I tōna mānga I te kēnana I ho mai nei koe o mātou tīpuna I nā rai nā mata kororia ki tō ingoa tapu āmene. O tira koutou mā tēnei rā te mihi ake kia kōtau e tai a kanohi mai I runga I tēnei zui, me ki rai runga I tēnei matahiko. O tira he kaupapa tino whakahirahiro ki tēnei, kia kōtau, so ko te tūmanako kia pai hoki tō kōtau rā, o tira kia pai te whakarongo, te titiro hoki ki tēnei whakaahua. So just on behalf of Ngā Waia Te Tui, and of course Maiki Wairaka, our project lead Kelsey, and also the professional himself, Rau Hoskins, we'd just like to thank you all for being available to attend this morning. So kei a koe, e hoa.
Kia ora tātou, mihi kawake kia koe Kelsey, nau I whakarite, I whakahaere wenei momo zui, kia koe hoki wetini mihi kawana kia koe nau I whakapai tō tātou nei hui huinga, tēnā koe, tēnā kaurua, tēnā tātou. So yeah, I just want to, I guess, give people a bit of a snapshot of what's going on and what's been going on the last 20 odd years in terms of Kaupapa Māori architecture. And I do want to acknowledge the ability to sit with Linda and Graham Smith in the early 1990s when I went back to do my master's. And this thing called Kaupapa Māori was pretty new then, but to be under the tutelage of those people, including Leone PM as well, was really important. And I guess Kaupapa Māori has moved on along a lot in the last 20 plus years, but and indebted to those that support that I received at that time. So no hea ahau, hurui ki te maunga, tū te ao tū te pō, Ngāti Hau ki ota Ngāti Wai ki tai. So just below the Bay of Islands is our kāinga moana at Whangaru, and over the hill at Whakapara is our Marae. And as a young graduate, I was lucky to run the gauntlet of working for my own people to design our wharehui here, and followed that up in 2015 with the design of our wharekai. And we've got one whare left to build, and that's the wharepaku. So then we'll have complete facilities. Back to our papakāinga at Whangaru. So we've got no road access there, so we have been on alternative energy since Mai Rano. So we've never had power. So we've progressively developed our systems to suit those issues. Just a little bit more background. Te Matapihi, in 2010 we had the first ever National Māori Housing Conference in Rotorua. And out of that conference arose a call to action to set up our own entity, and that became Te Matapihi. So in 2011, I was appointed chair of Te Matapihi, and so that has been an important entity to focus on supporting Māori home ownership, home improvement aspirations across the motu. Design Tribe Architects, we set that up in '94 when a group of us graduates came back together and wanted to set up a collaborative practice that had a Māori focus. And a bunch of other stuff has happened in various panels and advisory roles along the way. And of course, the last bullet point there is our significant Te Manaki or Te Marae National Science Challenge project, which we completed last year. So the treaty context is obviously underpins everything that we discuss from a Kaupapa Māori perspective. Some key projects. I want to talk about our Te Pōti Marae project because it indicates a lot of key aspects of what we might call Kaupapa Māori approach to architecture. In other words, it's not about the flashy stuff, it's about what's real on the ground for the people. I'll talk about Te Aranga just briefly, and I've mentioned, I'll talk about Te Marae, Te Marae briefly as well. So our cultural context, we have in Tāmaki 19 iwi groupings that are recognised by the council, and there are another couple more about to be recognised, so it's growing. When I work in other parts of the motu, they are amazed, how can you get anything done with 19 iwi groups? In general, those iwi are used to working together, and if we have any given project, there may be between 4 and 12 iwi involved. But normally there's recognition of who the primary iwi are for that given project based on the whenua and who the others are. And the analogy that's given is that they all acknowledge the iwi that's driving the bus and the rest are on the bus, but they're not driving. So they will recognise who's got the primary mana whenua in that given location. Post-settlement governance entities, iwi that are lucky to have settled with the Crown are in a position of having structural setups whereby they can respond much more readily to projects, Kaupapa Māori projects and other projects within their rohe. Local authorities and their roles. Iwi and hapu as landowners, developers in their own right. I mean, Ngāti Hau, I think settled, was it 2014, Waitangi? And so, you know, a reasonably mature post-settlement entity now. Whereas us in the north, Ngāpuhi are still waiting. Others, Ngāi Tahu, quite mature with their settlement structures. Te Aranga, yeah, adopted formally by Auckland Council in 2013, and then some private developers who are voluntarily utilising those principles, and along with the CCOs, council-controlled organisations. So the treaty context, I mean, we all know about the treaty for us in Ngāpuhi. It is our tino taonga. My direct relations argued very strongly for the signing of the treaty. From their perspective, they had been engaging with Pākehā for best part of 70 years. My tupuna met Cook at the age of 8 years old in the Bay of Islands, and was, you know, part of engagements, both good and bad, leading right up till the signing of the treaty. So 70 years was from their perspective was, you know, we'd gone too far to turn back the clock, and we needed to try and make a relationship that was mutually beneficial. Significantly in November 2014, the Waitangi Tribunal ruled that the rangatira who signed Te Tiriti in February 1840 did not cede their sovereignty to Britain, and they did not cede authority to make and enforce law over their people or their territories. The rangatira did agree to share power and authority with Britain. So that was a very significant ruling by the tribunal, which has kind of been forgotten. But it is the elephant in the room in terms of the way that our current government exercises kawanatanga. So that was a finding which was probably too significant for any government to really look seriously at, and so, but it sits there as a significant statement of what we've always known in tautokero. And again, just remembering our own worldview, we are colonised by seeing the map the other way up. From childhood, we are brought up with the fact that we are the bottom of the world. We're from a Pacific and Māori perspective, we're at the top. At Mātātua with Ngāti Hau, we were privileged to be part of the return of Mātātua Wharenui. And in 2011, it came back and was finally relocated back close to its original site at Tūpapaku Rau there. And in this situation, the name of the whenua is significant. Yeah, there are many Tūpapaku on that whenua, but they are Ngāti Hau Tūpapaku, so the idea was kei te pai, they're our own. And we just won't dig very deep. So consequently, the foundations for this project were kept within 2 feet. We wouldn't dig lower than 2 feet, so that any core iwi that were there would be left as they were. Just an image which helps us reconnect to our origins in Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, and we can see Rapa Nui here over near Chile, and we can see Hawaii over here. And you can see how when you look at the map this way up, and with this Moana focus, we can change the way that we view who we are and who we most closely relate to. And of course, acknowledging, the whole rebirth of waka celestial navigation and the role of Heke Nuku Mai and others in that process, Jack Thatcher, Stanley Conrad. We were lucky with our students in 2013 to work directly with Heke Nuku Mai in the development of a star compass up at Aurere there. So we, with our Unitec theodolite, we located all these 32 points of Heke Nuku Mai's star compass, and these from that time on, these have been the markers which have enabled the navigators to memorize the night sky prior to setting off on their voyages. Back to Whakapara, 98, typical northern wharenui, where we have an aisle down the middle, and you can see we're about to set up for a tangihanga here, and the photographs take the place of the whakairo. In the north, we lost whakairo reasonably early on, so there's only about 6 or 7 carved whare in all of the north out of 130. And that's because of the early influence of the missionaries. Increasing, there are more whare being carved now and more aspirations for them to be carved, but the reality is it takes a long time and a lot of resources to carve a whare, and there's no clear path and no clear iwi support, financial support for whakairo and rāranga to occur. The funding arrangements through Oranga Marae are really focused on getting buildings improved, building new buildings, and not at the moment on the incorporation of narratives within and on the outside of these whare. So an early project we were involved with the last Labour government, when Trevor Mallard was the Minister of Education, was the Alfredton College. And so this is the first state school to have a wharenui as a core stage 1 facility, located in the heart of the school, and a place that every year 9 student is welcomed onto and within at the beginning of the school year. Some work we did with our students, in 2001 and 2, we did a whare raupo project, and then with Nader Glavish, we went to Puatahi Marae to build a whareniko. Now, Dame Nader was brought up in a whareniko and had so many fond memories of living with her grandmother there, and no power, but they did have a phone. They had a phone in the middle of their whareniko with a wind-up arrangement, and and that was on the Potoko Manawa where the phone was. So it showed actually how important that phone was to them at that time. And of course, a whareniko can be built in a week with just about zero cash and certainly no mortgage at all. So they were important projects for us to better understand what it took to build our domestic dwellings as opposed to our wharenui, which we knew were much more involved in terms of construction. So that was that whare. It still stands today. And this is Whiro Nahi in the middle and Nader on the right. And that's Whiro's wife. And Whiro and his wife have both passed away now. But it was a very significant project for them. Back to home, back to Te Ngākau Mahaki. So we worked with Dr. Lionel Grant and Judy Hohaya for 6 years from 2003 to 2009. And we were all aware of the significance of this whare, but also mindful that our hapu marae are not in a position to spend 6 years and $6 million on their meeting houses. And so it is a luxury to have this level of attention paid to a whare. And so we need to be mindful of that. That's not the reality for our pohara whānau marae. At Awanuiarangi, so we worked with Awanuiarangi since 1999, when the Apanui Infant School was converted to be the main headquarters for the wānanga on Domain Road there. And that was because the wānanga were not provided any government funding for capital works. So the three wānanga took a claim to the Waitangi Tribunal, the wānanga claim, and finally around 2010, the wānanga claim was settled, and the three wānanga got funding for their core capital projects. So the Apanui Infant School was able to be moved over the road to the kura, and new facilities created for their main campus in Whakatane there. And this whare on the corner here was originally designed as a boardroom. So the idea was that we had this elevated precious vessel where the pakeke could meet and decide on the future of the wānanga. Somewhere along the way, finance got hold of that structure, and finance have occupied that. I don't know which part of the wānanga occupies it now. But importantly, with the building of this structure, we were able to finally get our cafe operational inside Matiriro here, and the wharekai could begin to operate more properly, a proper library situation. Flipping over to another project in Venice, 2014, we were part of the Venice Biennale project, and the essence of our exhibition here was the significance of Māori architecture and Pacific architecture to the best of our Aotearoa architecture. So on the right-hand side, you can see this new whatarangi. It's a type of pātaka that was dedicated to taonga, not kai. And so we commissioned this pātaka here. And inside it, you can see a white model. Now that model is actually the Auckland War Memorial Museum. So what we have done is reappropriated the museum, which has in turn appropriated our taonga. So that was the message that we were giving there. In this tented structure, we talked about really a whakapapa Aotearoa architecture, going from earliest beginnings right through to contemporary projects like Te Ngākau Mahaki. Working with Te Puia, we have designed and built this bronze pātaka. So this pātaka was built from kauri, built traditionally from all its constituent parts that locked together with timber jointing techniques. Then each of those timber elements was taken down and cast, and so we have this. I guess it's a way of honouring our one aspect of our pā architecture. And of course, pātaka were about two things. One was statement of wealth, and the more elaborate and large your pātaka were, the wealthier you were as an iwi, because your wealth was really in your kai, the ability to preserve and grow kai and store kai. And then, of course, the other wealth was the degree to which you could embellish those critical parts of the pā with your cultural identity. So at Te Puia, they have a significant bronze casting capacity, and acknowledging that our taonga have been cast since Cook's time. Cook, in his first voyage, took home a hoi, a paddle, and he had it cast in bronze back in England, and then he came back and represented it back to iwi in bronze. So we've had that tradition for a long time. The Te Puia Māori Arts and Crafts Centre Institute in Rotorua, these were new facilities for stone, bone, pounamu, whakairo rākau, raranga, and bronze casting. So we had to provide a state-of-the-art facilities for those people going about their business while allowing manuhiri to look at what they're doing without being a hoha to them, and without them being endangered by flying wood chips or chisels or whatever else. So quite a complex brief there, and that's those facilities there. And the Arairo, which is the upper level pathway which winds its way through the facilities. A project which is being built right now at the University of Waikato is the first time any university has elected to incorporate an Indigenous cultural centre in the heart of their facilities. So within the red line, we are getting a new Marae complex, a new student hub, a new Vice Chancellor's office, and a conference centre as well. So this is on the right-hand side, we've got the entry from Hillcrest Road. We've got our Marae Aotea here, got our whare here. The whare has got no rear, so it is insulated on both sides with facilities, meeting rooms, student spaces. It has a secondary maho on the other side, which faces into the student hub. And then we have Faculty of Māori Indigenous Studies here as well. And our wharekai and a wharepaku as well. So the challenge here was how to integrate marae facilities which were fully functional for traditional groups who were arriving at the wānanga, whare wānanga, but also captured the imagination of students in particular, and let them see that Kaupapa Māori Architecture was capable of supporting modern learning environments while maintaining tikanga marae. And another view and another view there. So you can see the entry to the maho here, quite a deep maho. So we designed that maho so that it could be deep enough to be a venue in its own right. Many of us have had times where we've taken a hui out into the maho or the porch, and it's sunny and sheltered and it's a good place. sometimes our maho aren't deep enough. They're just too shallow for decent sized hui. So that's the whakaaro there, is to deepen that maho. CRL, well, this is the biggest infrastructure project the country's ever taken on. It's about $4 billion. It's been going since 2012. It's got to be going another 4 years. So we are getting 3 new underground stations. And so with the first one is near the Aotea Centre, will be called Te Waihorotu Station. The next one is Karanga Hape, up at Karanga Hape Road. And the third one is Maungawhau Station, near the current Mount Eden Station. So what was negotiated with iwi was that they would have the control of all the cultural narratives and design of all the entrances to all of these stations. And so consequently, mana whenua have been working very closely with the CRL leadership for 8 years. This is the station environment for Maungawhau, acknowledging Te Ipu Pakore Puna, which existed in this location here. And this is the water wall, which is proposed for the Maungawhau station, which remembers 2 things. One is Mataoho, the deity associated with volcanic activity here in Tāmaki, and it also remembers the significant puna in this area, in particular Te Ipu Pakore. Through to the project that we ran with our tauira from 2014 to 2019, so a 5-year project, and located here at Te Pōti, also known as Koangarehua. Now, modern day Pipiriki on the Whanganui River is has maybe about 70, 80 houses associated with it. This side of the river is actually used to be more populous. There were over 300 people living on this side of the river in the 1840s. It was sunnier, it had better growing areas. It was, however, subject to flooding. So sometimes, but Pipiriki as a place was covered both sides of the river. And in 2014, we found the original wharenui, a pātaka, and the cottage here. And so we had our ruruku, our karakia. We had to get there by jet boat. Tūrama Hawira would accompany us to do the karakia ruruku. And looking back in 1880s, population had gone down a bit, but still a lot more people living on the right bank of the river. These are all the wheat growing areas here, and there were a number of flour mills on the river, which provided economic base for Whanganui iwi. And again, this is Te Pōti Main Street in 1885, and you can see at that stage all traditional dwellings, all built from resources at hand. Back to this image here, you can see 2 pātaka with corrugated iron roofs. So by the 1880s, we were beginning to see some Western materials coming in. And I'll talk about that later on as well. 1910, this is the view at Te Pōti Marae. This is Koangarehua Wharenui, which is the main building that we've restored. This is how we found it in 2014. And these are the projects that we have completed up until 2019. So we've restored the whare puni fully. We've put in place a water well. We've put in place a water collection tower here and water tanks, built new composting toilets, relocated the pātaka and restored it, and we built a new dining structure and a new kitchen structure. So yes, the whare was an earth floor whare, so consequently it had a lot of work required to be done. The back wall, new framing, so we used all tōtara framing, so we didn't put any treated materials into this whare, so we replaced raupo with raupo, and we replaced the timber framing, which was mainly rimu, with either rimu or tōtara, which is even better than rimu. Fixing up the walls, putting in piles, gathering raupo in the nearby repo, taking the raupo to the river, jet boating it downstream, and then our matua here, Jim Schuster, an expert in raupo and fibre. He was installing that in the wall cavity, and you can see it there, and it's made the whare extremely warm. And we're gradually, at this stage, getting through to the new maihi and amo. We've got new weatherboards there. Here we are replacing, levelling the floor. We strapped timber blocks onto our students' feet so they could compact that floor. Pulling off the iron from the pātaka. We found this very old British corrugated iron from Wolverhampton. The whare at night, and then relocating the pātaka, creating a new subfloor, new walls, and then physically lifting the roof structure onto site, building a new kitchen lock-up with some water storage here, lifting the pātaka roof onto the base, pātaka roof in place. On the left here, there's an old chimney that we've been working with to stand upright again, and building a new composting toilet on the left-hand side and a shower on the right. And then getting the original fireplace completed with the fire going, and a new deck here, a social deck. And then the whare replacing the timber panelling in there with tōtara, and a new potoko manawa here. And that's kind of how we left it in April 2018. Some of our students that were involved from the first year, and some of those that were involved in the final year, is that you, Kelsey, there. Anyway, it was great to have a good number of Māori students and all sorts of students joining us for that significant project. This pātaka here, further up the river, has just come to light. It's in its original condition and location, built in the 1880s, and it was actually used as a shop. And a shop to house flour and sugar, flour that was being milled down the river, and sugar as well for travellers. And this is the subfloor, so it's actually in very good condition given its age. Everything's tōtara, piles, bearers, joists, everything. So that's a really special building, and we're just working with the whānau there to clear the bush away from around it, so that it can breathe a bit better and last another, at least another 50 years anyway. And this is a piece of historical research which I encourage our students to engage in. Papers past, so we were able to go into papers past and categorically determine the age of this pātaka, as the settler records in his diary from 1891 how this pātaka was in place in 1891, so was at least a few years old then, so at least coming up to 140 years old, probably the oldest, certainly the oldest shop in the Whanganui region. Some more projects we're doing, which are very much around the realities of our whānau. In Rau Kokore here, we have got these pod life container dwellings from Whakatane, and they have been trucked to site and arranged around a large communal deck. So on the right hand side you can see a sleeping pod with an ensuite. On the left hand side, same sleeping pod with ensuite. In the middle we have a bedroom with no servicing, and then on the left hand side we have a dining kitchen dining pod, and then we have a separate laundry pod. And these have all been trucked to site and put on screw piles, and we've got clear roofing over this central roof here. So very cost-effective approach to a modern Māori living in the coastal environment. You don't spend all day inside your pod. You're out fishing. You're in the garden. You're out on the deck here, and you go inside at night or when it's rainy. So it's exactly how our living used to be. We were brought up in clustered dwellings. We didn't live inside. We lived outside. We went inside when we needed to. So I think projects like this are very humble, but very much closer to where we've come from in terms of how we've lived communally and with clustered dwellings as opposed to all living in one house. Finally, just working with Tami Tauroa in Ngāti Koroki Kahukura in the Lake Karapiro, a papakāinga which has relied on Waikato Tainui legal muscle and financial muscle as well. A piece of land was made available by the parent trust, piece of farmland that wasn't very convenient for paddocks. So we've got 11 dwellings there on generous quarter-acre sections. No fences, just trees to demarcate where your space is. And then in the middle here, we've got a communal laundry, and then a shade house and nursery, and then a large mahinga kai, or marae in this area here. So we've got a worm-based system to deal with all the waste here. We've got water from a puna that is across the road, and telecommunications are available nearby for broadband. And this papakāinga was opened about 6 weeks ago. So a significant project for Ngāti Koroki Kahukura, but certainly relied on the parent iwi to provide some funding support and the ability to mobilise lawyers when required, when the nearby farmers decided they didn't want Māori living back on their own whenua. So Waikato Tainui says, no, we're not gonna roll over here. So they threw their lawyers at it and went through the environment court process and won, of course. Finally, just a couple of images around cultural presence. Unfortunately, in Tāmaki, we still don't have any iwi cultural presence on our waterfront like they do in Wellington. And we, with the America's Cup being a much smaller affair and probably with very few overseas visitors attending, we've lost another opportunity to get a dedicated facility on our waterfront here. So the best we can probably hope for is a kind of a pop-up facility. So it's very, very poor because, you know, in 2011 with the Rugby World Cup, we had, you know, 11 waka in the Viaduct Basin. Everyone enjoyed that spectacle. And yet those kaihoi had nowhere to get changed, nowhere to have a shower afterwards. They had to struggle through a crowd of 200,000 people to their buses and then bus back to Wairaka and other locations to have a shower. So we've got a lot of work to do, and look forward to you know, the contributions that all of you will make in the next 20, 30 years to try and change some of these visual presence issues. We walk around Tāmaki, it's very hard to see where we are in the world because our architecture and our landscape architecture still has a strong colonial and North American European flavour to it. Ngata in the early 1920s, he set up the Māori Arts and Crafts Institute. He set up the legislation, and that was because he could not find a carver to do some work on his own body. And so he became very concerned that we were losing those traditional arts. And so he and Te Puea Herangi worked together to revive those arts, including waka construction. So here in 1940, we had the Wharirunga opened to celebrate the centenary of the signing of the treaty. And we also had Ngāti Matapāuru, the main waka taua, launched at the same time. So, I mean, I'm going to open it up to part-time now. Kia ora tātou. I'll just stop share so I can see the chat. So Tamitha Paul, we're currently preparing for our district plan at Wellington City Council. I was wondering what your thoughts were around heritage protections for Kaupapa Māori infrastructure. Does it happen, or are heritage protections and designations something that is really only utilised for Pākehā heritage? I think it's a good question. It's true that our heritage legislation is really set up for two things. One is it's set up to protect Pākehā buildings, because Māori buildings aren't seen to have the same levels of significance. And secondly, our heritage legislation is designed as if only Pākehā are doing development. Now, at Rau Kokore there, with that image I showed you, we were required to get an archaeological assessment and a cultural impact assessment from Whanau Apanui to cover off their own development. And the iwi there was saying, well, you know, this is our history, our culture. It's a living culture. We have determined that this is an appropriate place to build. And yes, we know our tupuna lived in this area, but so there's two significant issues around, you know, the legislation as it stands. The third point I would say is that a lot of Māori are reluctant to list their buildings under the current Heritage Preservation Act, because it means that their mana over those buildings is being reduced. In other words, another entity, another crown entity, suddenly has control over your wahi, tapu, or your whare. So consequently, a lot of Māori say, well, no, we don't want to list our buildings and places as heritage, because then you use that information against us when we want to do something on that whenua or to that building. So it's a big area, and I think there's a lot more conversations to go. Within Heritage New Zealand, there are some good Māori staff members, but my view is that they are also constrained by the 2014 Act, which is only recent here. Next question. Bernadette Muir from Ara Institute, Canterbury. I teach the Bachelor of Architecture Studies. I would love to follow up with you about how we can better integrate Te Aranga Māori and Māori and Architecture program. Currently, I connect with Rau Hoskins, who's my nephew, and Te Marino. As we have no one in our department with Māori ancestry, we are really keen to build connections and evolve our course content delivery. Yes, I think you need to develop a strategy for your whole course. I would recommend a cultural audit of your course, so you can actually look at all those dimensions. And so what will come out of that is staffing, pedagogy, iwi relations. So we're currently within architecture here at Unitec, we are currently re-looking at our own issues. So happy to stay in touch on what you're doing at Ara and what you might be able to do. And it's what I would suggest is that you look to make some changes next year. So integrate what you can into 2021 academic year, and then in that same year you develop your full strategy, so that from 2022 onwards you can have a much more robust set of structures in place to support Māori students and Māori architectural knowledge transmission.
Yeah, thanks.
Ka pai. Pātai anō. You can do an oral one if you want to, if you don't want to type.
I have a question. Hopefully I can word this properly, but how would, well, Kaupapa Māori is, I guess, quite generic. So how would one, I guess, apply that to, say, Ngāpuhitanga or anything like that?
I think you have to look at it on a project by project basis. And if you're working directly with a Māori community, then you have a Kaupapa Māori relationship that is established. You're working collectively for a common goal. You're supporting iwi, hapu, or whānau to achieve their aspirations in the built environment. Where Kaupapa Māori really comes to the fore is where you've got a public project, like a piece of council land, and they want to get a little bit of iwi flavour on the side. And often our councils are unaware or uncommitted to having really substantive conversations with iwi. So it comes down to developing a Kaupapa Māori engagement in the first instance. And if you do apply the Te Aranga principles, which starts with the mana principle, then that is designed to make sure that you actually create the necessary conditions for a working relationship at the outset. And you don't end up with a situation where a project is barreling along and suddenly someone thinks, oh, we haven't got an iwi view. And then so some design work's already completed and finally you get an iwi person to the table and they see, you know, a bunch of design work that's already completed. So Kelsey, the key thing there is to work with the client, whoever that is, to structure a working relationship with iwi and hapu, which is treaty-based, which means that iwi are always at the table from the earliest conversation right through to the opening ceremony, and who get to say where their cultural narratives can and should be manifested in the project. So they control those narratives. And they won't offer up their narratives unless they are confident in that working relationship. So that's a significant issue where we are having significant Māori artworks that are not outside of Marae. So you've got, you know, po and other things that sit in the wilderness. And so iwi have to be confident that those po can be protected, because in lots of situations they've been vandalized and chainsawed and so on. So that's a conversation that iwi need to have around the motu, was how comfortable are you to put your tupuna within artistic installations in locations where you can't directly look after them. On the Huntley bypass, Waikato Tainui have actually done, as you many would have seen, a number of very significant installations. But you can see in a motorway situation, you can actually protect those artworks because you can't actually stop your car, get your chainsaw out and run up the hill to do anything, because it's just quite difficult. So I think those are interesting conversations, but the critical advice there is to develop a working relationship with local hapu and iwi, which is suitable to them, and take the time required to get that working relationship established.
Cool, thanks. Just one more question. As a student, I won't say where, yeah, Unitec, it's been quite hard to access, you know, Kaupapa Māori knowledge, especially in architecture school, just anything Te Ao Māori, Te Aranga Māori. What are some, I guess, tips for students like me who are kind of struggle, or who may be struggling, especially those who are in bachelors?
I think the best way is to use the Ngā Aho network and contact 2 or 3 people who you think could act as mentors and who can periodically engage with you via Zoom or have a catch up in person. So I think it's a matter of extending your network to those people that you may have come across in hui or other forums. So I think that's the best way, acknowledging that people are busy in this space.
Can you check on him? Sorry. I'm just checking on him at the moment.
Kia ora, Kelsey. Hey, it's Ngāpuhi here.
Yep.
Hey, kia ora tātou. Hey, just while we're trying to sort out Rau coming back, what are some of the ways, Kelsey, that you as a student have coped in those challenging environments of, trying to maintain your Māoritanga, te ao Māori, Kaupapa Māori perspective in a very challenging westernised view? What are some of the things that you've done?
A lot. I guess for starters, I was very fortunate to have Whaiake, the mentoring scholarship at Unitec, that really helped me grow and give me, I guess, a home as Māori, just to be Māori and to be around other students who are succeeding and striving for more. And I guess I've also been very fortunate. I've actually been very fortunate in my studies. Also having Ngāwai Te Tui. I did my internship there last year or the year before that, and yeah, that's pretty much just been my home, like another home for me. So I guess I would say really just reaching out to other Māori students, getting a solid foundation, solid friend group to kind of hang around, work together. You don't realize, especially with COVID, you don't realize the impacts of it, not being able to be around your friends and to work with them. Just, at least you may all be struggling, but you're struggling together. And also, I guess, yeah, just chasing any opportunity to learn or to be immersed in Te Aranga Māori, Te Ao Māori, the Māori community, and also back home as well. That was a really big one for me in terms of identity and I guess kind of being able to stand in a space that doesn't necessarily reflect you, but it's okay because you know who you are and you can create that space for yourself and for your peers. So yeah.
Good, I'm back on now. I'm on Waitangi's computer. I see there's a question from Perry, is it? How was Kaupapa Māori landscape architecture implemented during the design process at University of Waikato?
Kia ora. Yeah, my name's Charlotte Aho. Sorry, I'm a landscape architect student from Lincoln University, and so I know that kia ora. So that was just my pātai because, anything would be great.
Okay, well, we had Rates Architecture, or Rate Landscape Architecture, and so
they didn't have any Māori staff directly involved, so we did have to work with them a lot and guide them in terms of the Marae Atea, the dimensions of it, how to enable whakaeke to happen, how to have a kaumātua queer shelter there. So yeah, what I would say is that most of the mainstream landscape architecture firms do have Māori staff at various levels of seniority, but there are much more required. People who understand those things. I just had a Zoom this morning on a project down in the Wairaka, and the landscape architect involved there was very lacking in knowledge and not very helpful. And so, and she was applying a total Western lens to the issues that we were discussing. And it's like, you're supposed to be working for the client here, but you're actually recolonizing us. So, yeah, all I can say is we had to provide a lot of support to rates. They were up for it. They were, you know, very open, very well-meaning. But yeah, you really are required to get into those larger firms to have the most impact that you can as soon as possible on those sorts of projects.
Kia ora.
Perry has asked a question in the chat saying, how was Kaupapa Māori landscape architecture?
That was the one we just done. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Charlotte.
But, yeah. Sorry, my bad. Any more pātai?
Well, if there's no more pātai, I've got my students, my ihu mātao students waiting. I'll give you a little bit of an update. We're working with the whānau at ihu mātao to develop a kaitiaki hub and to take an existing barn and turn it into a resource and an education centre. So that's what our students are doing right now. And in 2 weeks' time, we'll be in the build phase. So we're actually accumulating materials now, all donated materials, and getting them trucked to the site. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then in 27th, we're starting 27th of this month on site, and we'll go through to the 31st. And obviously on the weekend, we're hoping for a Labour Greens government to be confirmed, so that a deal can be struck to return the whenua at ihu mātao. And so all going well, we'll be able to do that as a, either as a ongoing protest or as a, a proactive move forward, moving from protest to land protection.
Awesome.
What are your thoughts on whānau build the Māori Party policy? Is it possible? I think that the Māori Party housing policy has got a lot of merit. I think the problem with the last coalition government has been that their housing focus has been very generic. It's been very much on state housing, which does support us, but it doesn't provide for customised whānau solutions. And so I think regardless of whether the Māori Party get or not, we will be advocating very strongly for a Māori housing strategy which has substantial offerings in terms of customised whānau build approaches. So that's a good pātai there. It's been slow going on the policy front, but we are now confident with both Kāinga Ora and with MHUD that the people are in a place are listening to the advocacy that we're making in terms of Māori housing policy.
Okay, I guess we'll end it there, but I'd just like to say a huge thank you, Rau, for taking the time to be our third speaker. I know how immensely busy you are with your schedule, so really grateful that you could take the time out and share a bit of your knowledge and also the diverse range of projects that you've done. I thought it was really, I really love to see Te Pōti there, you know, working there with you on that, and I thought it was really interesting to see the update on the new whare found the shop. So, and it looks like it's in really great condition. So, really excited to see what's gonna happen there, and yeah, all the amazing projects that are you're gonna be doing in the future, especially Humatao. And also like to thank you for everything you've done for the architecture world too, as a Māori student. So yeah, definitely someone that we look up to and that we learn a lot from. So yeah, ngā mihi nui. Sorry, it's a bit loud. I'll close off with a karakia. Cool. Ka pā ki tua, ka pā ki waho, ka pā ki te whare, ka pā ki te roa, ka pā ki te pau e tūnei, kia mā te ariki, kia mā te tauira, noho e rotau, e tāne te waioa e whano, whana, haramai te toki, haumi e hui e, tā iki e.
Tā iki e, ngā mihi.
Thanks everyone for coming. Cool. See ya.